they?
Yeah, the ones that
It was Cosimo de' Medici and that family and the Borgias. But this family, there were, I think, 11 popes who bore the name Borgia in a 100-year period. So these people were very, very well connected. They were very wealthy. They had disposable income, which was something new in the world. And they invented a whole bunch of things which God knows this city lives or dies by. I mean, like connoisseurship, patronage of the arts, and secular research projects. I mean, they were funding Da Vinci's work on catapults and flying machines at the same time that they were keeping all these painters paid and in mistresses and so forth. They were organizing archaeological digs. People couldn't believe this stuff. I mean, we have assimilated all this, but they had forgotten the classical world. And they lived in places like Rome and Naples and Venice, but they had never dug. And they'd just been quarrying the Colosseum and stuff like that. Well, then when they began bringing this stuff out of the ground, and then the Platonic corpus and all this, they just went ape for classicism. So ape that now we're this year celebrating the 500th anniversary of Columbus's voyage, which in a sense can be seen as the cherry on the top of the Renaissance mental explosion. We are still living in a classical world. We still react against classicism. The buildings we live in, the clothing we wear, our notion of how gentlemen behave, our attitudes toward women largely, our attitudes towards private wealth, all of this is classicism. And it had been dead 1,200 years before these Italians latched onto it and dusted it off and set it up. And, the modernism, in its broadest context, whatever that means, is the first movement to come along to be able to in any way challenge classicism. The subsets of the art movements and literary movements that preceded modernism were simply aspects of classicism. Romanticism, mannerism, the Baroque, all of these are like facets of the classical object. It's only in modernism. And what modernism represents, in my humble opinion, is a kind of return to the archaic. Modernism deconstructs the clarity of the Western eye. If you have to date where modernism begins, it begins with Impressionism, which takes the clarity of the Western eye and begins to dissolve it, and the linear, the columns and lines, that's how narrative was until James Joyce and Henry James and people like that showed that narrative could be broken up. Modernism is a form of primitivism, strangely enough. The people who created modernism, people like Marcel Duchamp and Picasso and the Surrealists, they were tremendously influenced, in the case of Picasso, by African art, masks and sculpture, stuff that had never been seen in Paris in 1905 through 15, and everybody was tremendously excited by it. So modernism is part of this much larger phenomenon which I call the Archaic Revival. The discovery of the unconscious through Freud and Jung, the deconstruction of the image, first the image seen through Impressionism, and then the image imagined is deconstructed through Surrealism and Dada, And then finally, the concentration on the materials of art, which you get in abstract expressionism, where it is about paint. It's no longer about paint in the service of the visual pictorialism. And then all the postmodern stuff, which is, of course, just sort of running naked, screaming through the street kind of aesthetic.
Back to the is no one